Your tail between your legs. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about that deep hip pain that you can get in the back of your hip and share another concept that I think is significant to troubleshooting it and figuring out how to move past that pain. So if we consider the hip joint as the ball inside of the socket, we want the ball to sit neatly in the socket like this. But if you're holding a lot of tension in the back of your hip, if you're holding this tension because you chronically tuck your butt or hold your tail between your legs, so to speak, or if you have weak glutes and your deep stabilizing muscles, hang on. Okay, sorry about that. My dog has a friend over and they were being disruptive. Anyway, so one reason why you might have a lot of tension in the back of your hip is that you constantly tuck your butt under. The other reason is that you're using the deep stabilizing muscles to do most of the work instead of your big glute max, and we need to shift the workload. And those two reasons are not mutually exclusive. In fact, most of the time they're going to exist in combination, but one of them will probably be more significant than the other. So we want the hip to sit neatly in the socket, but when you have all of this tension in the back, it pushes the hip more forward in the socket. So not as in dislocated, obviously, but just slightly more forward in the socket. And when it does that, it's making the muscles in the front of your hip longer and less effective, and it's making the muscles in the back of your hip still tight and painful. Okay, and so one other thing that can happen when your hip sits more forward in the socket is that it can rub against the labrum in the front of the hip socket and cause deterioration of the labrum. So we want to find a balance in that hip where it's sitting centered in the socket and not being shoved forward by the tension back here. And so in this case, that's where you find that working on strengthening the muscles in the front of the hip, working that hip joint backward a little bit more so it's centered in that socket is more effective than stretching. But you might at some point down the road return to the stretching, or you might find that stretching isn't an issue for you, that you just need to strengthen the front, recenter the hip, and turn on glute max. So hopefully that helps, but let me know if you have questions.